back, everybody, to our next episode of Tech Safe, where we help people understand the biological effects of today's wireless technology, and most importantly, what we can do to try and protect ourselves, our loved ones, and our communities. I want to give a shout out and my deep gratitude to our hosts here at WCCA TV in Worcester, Massachusetts, for giving us this opportunity to share the truth with technology safety. So today I am delighted to introduce our guest. Her name is Donna Desanto. She is an experienced pediatric physical therapist and certified functional medicine health coach based out of Reading and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Excuse me. She has a strong interest in environmental medicine and is the founder of Pennsylvania for Safe Technology, an education and advocacy resource for Pennsylvanian families and others. And I am Cecelia Doucette, the director of Massachusetts for Safe Technology. So it's my honor to introduce to you now Dr. Donna Desanto. Welcome, Donna.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Cece.
You're so welcome. So let's get right to it. How did you learn that today's wireless technology has very serious biological effects?
Well, initially I learned from Dr. Martha Herbert and her early work on this, her extensive work on this. But at that point, I only was really thinking it affected children with autism. But when I went to the Cleveland Clinic, for an appointment for myself, my doctor, that was one of the first things she said was to reduce my exposure to electromagnetic radiation and to opt out of a smart meter. And I was shocked. And I didn't know where to start because it was all, I knew to get rid of my cordless phone. I, knew that from Dr. Herbert, but I had no idea what else to do. I remember scrambling for information. And then as I, was doing my doctoral work, I was, really delving into lifestyle variables and knew this was one of them. Wow. So I, ended up finding the Environmental Health Trust and, of course, they got me on track, and Theodore Scorado really helped bring me up to speed. And I presented on this to the Americans for Physical Therapy Association as part of my webinar on lifestyles and health.
Wow, Donna, I would love to see that if that recording is available. I'd love to share it with my own physical therapist. So if you have that
well, thank you.
available.
Unfortunately, the shelf life is over now, so
okay.
It's down. But if it's still on, it would be on the APTA website. If it's there, it was there for about 4 years.
Oh, fantastic.
Take down.
Yeah.
But it was wonderful to have that opportunity. And then that also forced me to learn more. And I think, too, practicing in Philadelphia, the one day I went to an appointment and there was a giant cell tower, like 25 feet from the sliding board. And grandmother and I looked at each other and we were like, we can't have therapy here. And that kind of got me started on advocating for children's health. And then when I started to really understand what was going on a bigger level, with wireless infrastructure and the biological harms, that was when I got more into it and founded Pennsylvanians for Safe Technology, especially after my first trip to the Capitol in Pennsylvania. I knew we needed to do this.
Well, that is so phenomenal. And my path was very similar. I remember watching a lecture that Dr. Deborah Davis was giving to other healthcare practitioners, and she is the founder of the Environmental Health Trust. And as I'm listening to this, I'm like, you've got to be kidding me that this man-made radiation that the industry has welcomed us to enjoy so conveniently is a neurotoxin, an immunosuppressant. It causes cancers and DNA damage. It causes insomnia, headaches, nosebleeds, nausea, dizziness. And the list goes on: allergy, autism, Alzheimer's, ADD, ADHD. And you mentioned the work of Dr. Martha Herbert. She was here in Massachusetts before she retired. She founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital and sees huge correlations between what we know happens scientifically with the microwave radiation exposures from our devices and what she was seeing in the families in her care. So this world just gets smaller and smaller with where we cross paths, but it all lands at the same place. We need to start learning enough to feel comfortable to choose amazing, safe technology, and it's not rocket science to do. On the back of your router, There are Ethernet ports, just plug back in. And who knew, but you can buy little adapters for your devices for 20 or 30 bucks for your phone, for your laptop, for your tablet, for all your gaming stuff. And please don't use a radiating device near your children. So, Donna, I know that you have specialized in pediatric work in your career. Can you tell us a bit about how what you've learned and what you've experienced personally has changed your career outlook?
Yes, I was very pleasantly surprised that even when families would take modest, and in Philadelphia, my goodness, there's only so much one can do because the radiation's coming in from the homes on the side. It's a very, densely populated area. But the families that made the choice to, use wired technology and to turn off the wireless functions, to hardwire their internet, those kids did a lot better. It was really heartwarming to see that. And even things like moving the child's high chair away from the Wi-Fi router or, just the more distance you got, you could see the improvement, as they made better choices.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the distance. So right now, the CDC, which is the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, they recognize the biological harm from what's called ionizing radiation. That's got enough power to knock the atom off of, whatever, and then it screws things up. So that's why when we go to get an X-ray, we wear a shield, right? And
Right.
we would never leave ourselves or our children out in the sun 24/7. So the amount of time you're exposed is huge. And then shielding is really important. So the CDC already recognizes we need to be extremely careful around radiation. So they use that three-pronged approach. Spend as little time as you can radiating yourself. Create as much distance from radiation as you can, and if you can't get away from it, then you should probably learn how to shield. And now, shielding can be tricky because what we know is that there are paints and fabrics that have metal in the fabric. You might have silver linings inside each one of the threads that can create a barrier from that radiation being able to hit you. There are also paints that have the metal shreds in them that also can help to create that barrier. But there's a lot of caution that needs to be done with shielding, and there are professionals out there who are highly trained and certified through the Building Biology Institute. So if anybody wants to think about shielding after they control everything that is under their control, then they might want to reach out to a building biologist and get some professional expertise. But Donna, I know that you've done some shielding for yourself. Can you walk us through how you recognized that some of these exposures were starting to impact the way you felt, and then what you did about that?
Yes, as the Cleveland Clinic doctor predicted, I should not have received the smart meter. And I didn't know that I had one on my home that was transmitting at a low level, which in hindsight was probably why I was having all those problems. But when they really started, widespread smart meter networks in our area, that's when I got sick immediately. And I was really very surprised because I thought, like a lot of other environmental toxins, that my reaction to this would be slow. And I was a functional medicine health coach. I had amazing recovery. Before I went to Cleveland, the reason why I went was I was starting to have trouble walking, and I loved my job. Like I loved my job. I loved Philadelphia, and I wanted to continue. So I went to the Cleveland Clinic, to the Center for Functional Medicine, for that reason. And what they taught me was so important because when that meter went on in our neighborhood, it didn't even go on my house. I immediately got so much worse to the point where I could not live in my house. I'm a mother of 5 children. I'm a mother unable to live in her house, like she owns with her husband. So to have to leave, it was the hardest thing to have to leave my family, and the effect on the family was horrible. But I was able to stay with someone else for 2 months as I sort of got my wits together. Because you wake up and all of a sudden, it wasn't like I woke up, it would happen in the middle of the day. But at the end of the day, I couldn't sleep there. I tried to sleep. I just got sicker and sicker and sicker the longer I was in the house. So when I went to this other home that was completely shielded, I was totally normal. And then I would try to come back here and visit. And I couldn't even do simple things. I would just come into the house and it would be severe headaches, the nausea, the heart palpitations. I started nearly passing out. And at that point, the doctors didn't really understand this, even though I tried to present information, it was early on. So, it was very clear that in a shielded environment, I could be fine. So it was scary. It was really scary because you say shielding could backfire. And it kind of did. The first couple of things we did didn't work. But my husband was right. The room that I'm in right now is what we should have started with. And so.
Yeah, it's really hard.
So all has to shield it. A lot of it is. You have to be careful. You have to make sure all 6 sides are shielded, or that you've worked, and nothing is perfect. It's like any medical treatment. If you want to look at it that way, there's benefits, there's risks. What are the benefits? What are the risks? And where's your decision and all of that?
And every body is biologically different, so it's got to be tailored to what your environment is, what your body's response is. I met another healthcare practitioner who lives here in Massachusetts, and when you mentioned the smart meters, you made me think of her. So she owned her own condo, and all of a sudden she started getting all these symptoms, the anxiety, the depression, the insomnia, the heart irregularities, and didn't know what was going on. And so she wound up, like you, she went off and couch surfed with friends and loved ones. And every time she came back into that condo, she would get all these symptoms again. Well, she finally realized that there was a bank of 7 smart meters that had been installed on her unit right outside her kitchen wall. And so she had learned there was shielding paint, so she painted the whole wall all the way down her condo with this carbon black paint and then put a pretty color over it and thought that she would be okay. But she didn't understand enough to know that that only shields things from one direction. The neighbors on the other side of the condo had decked cordless phones and wireless routers and cell phones and, everything that pulse into her condo. It would hit that metal wall and then bounce back and wallop her twice. So we really need to be careful with shielding, but there are safer ways to do it, but highly recommend you work with a professional on that. And then I know since you're in Pennsylvania, you may also know Dr. Alexia McKnight. She is, so she's wonderful. She brought me in to do a program in her children's schools in Philadelphia. And during their Health and Wellness Professional Development Day, we did 4 webinars throughout the day to teach the teachers what symptoms to be on the lookout with these poor kids. Ask any teacher today, how many boxes of tissue do you go through in a school year? It used to be, you go through 1 or 2 a school year. Now they're going through them all the time for all of the nosebleeds, the nausea, the vomiting, and the kids keep winding up in the nurse's office with headaches and they can't focus and concentrate. So we were so delighted to get together and do a professional development presentation in Philadelphia. And the reason Dr. McKnight got involved in this, and mind you, she's a radiologist. She is a large animal veterinarian radiologist, so she works with radiology professionally, and she didn't know about the man-made, non-thermal, non-ionizing biological effects until a smart meter showed up on her home. And for folks who aren't familiar with what a smart meter is, when I was a little girl, I would play hide and seek. I'm one of 10 kids, so I could be hanging out in the bushes for a long time before somebody found me. I keep myself entertained watching the little dials go around on the meter on our house for gas, water, electric. Today it may be solar or propane. So that was an old-fashioned mechanical analog meter that was perfectly safe. And it would last for 40 or 50 years. And then the industry came into our towns and said, hey, we understand that you have to pay people to walk the neighborhoods once a month and gather up all of that data from the numbers that are on that analog meter, and then they do their billing from there. So the industry came in and said, we can save your town some money, and we're going to go to digital meters. And these digital meters have a radio frequency antenna in it, just like your cell phone and your laptop and your iPad and everything else has. And the first phase of this were the drive-bys. So now you can come into a neighborhood and from the truck, scan your scanner, point it at the house, it will pick up the data and the signal, and then you can do your billing from there. So that was the first phase, those drive-bys, and now they're starting to replace those with smart grids, which means everybody gets one of these smart meters on their homes. And at the first house, your data is collected, and then it's shoved over to the next house, and then the next house, and so on down the line. And then you wind up with this walloping amount of radiation transferring, coming. The further down the line you are, the more radiation you're getting. And then it goes up to a collection station, which is another radiation transmitter in your neighborhood somewhere. And then that gets collected by the industry and it gets sent back to where they do their billing. But there's a lot of risk with data privacy and security because your information's flying through the air. Anybody with a $100 hacking app at the curb can know when you're taking your showers, when the lights go off, and when you leave for the day, and they can back up their truck and take your toys, right? So there's a lot of risk. There's fire risk because with a power surge, these things aren't properly grounded. They can blow up, cause fires, and we now know that when you have an electrical fire like this, the fire department can't just show up and put it out. As soon as they position their fire hose on that fire, they are at risk for electrocution. So they have to get in touch with the electric company, who has to then go through their protocols to get all that power shut off, and that could take up to an hour. So if you are standing there watching your house burn down and it's a windy day, you may start seeing the whole neighborhood go up in smoke. So these smart meters are not smart at all. It's a great revenue stream for the industry, but we need our analog meters back, or just hardwire these meters to the house. Plug them into your home's Ethernet cable, and then you don't need to have any radio frequency radiation transmission. So we're so grateful that Senator Michael Moore here in Massachusetts joined us for an earlier version of our TechSafe program. He is the sponsor of a bill in Massachusetts that would give every citizen the right to opt out of these smart meters and just retain the analog meters that serve their purpose without kicking people out of their homes because they get so sick. And when Dr. McKnight had that smart meter put on her home, she didn't know what was going on, but she got so neurotoxic that she was out in traffic and could not remember whether that green light meant stop or go. It was a 50-50 gamble. And thank goodness she made the right choice and got home safely. But that's how bad these smart meters can affect people. So we're very hopeful that our legislature will pass the law that prohibits an enforcement of these meters on our homes and gives us a no-fee opt-out as a first step. But they really need to hold the industry accountable for bringing safe technology forward and put meters on our homes that do not transmit radiation. So, Donna, I'm so grateful for everything that you've been doing. Tell us how you founded Pennsylvanians for Safe Technology and what you guys have been working on there.
Yes, we founded it after one of the first hearings for the 5G antennas that they were putting in. And I was shocked that we weren't allowed to say anything. We weren't allowed to question it. There was an announcement made at that hearing that no negative publicity would get out about this. It took me about 3 days to pull it together to just buy the website and get started. And at that point, I only knew the people I met at the Capitol, and we were all just in absolute shock at what transpired. It was just, one person right after the next talking about the glories of wireless. And there was no discussion whatsoever about any adverse effects, none. And to this day, the legislators have not been briefed, despite our best efforts. We're now a team of over 12. We have an advisory board that's very significant. I think over a dozen MDs, engineers, PhDs. We're very blessed. I mean, I think enforcing these meters on everyone has brought people together. And we have a lot of colleagues in state, and we have a lot of colleagues out of state, and we work together. And I think, we're just so blessed for that. But yet, for all this knowledge and all these, back when I could go to the Capitol, when I was, able to do that, we worked so hard, and other teams have worked very hard. And here we are, year after year with the opt-out bill has not passed. And what the victims really need to be heard, because now we're at the point we're at the last 108 cases, and many of these people are very, very disabled. They tend to be older, they tend to be of limited financial means, and very disabled. And now many of them are losing their landlines. We have people who have no way to call out in an emergency. And we have another one who's about to have no way. And these are people with very well documented disabilities. And under the Americans with Disabilities Act, there really should be an accommodation for these people. And that's one of the things that we're really working on. That and working with the legislators on some sort of solution. I mean, really the solution is just to give these people, let them keep their analog meters. Because even with an opt-out meter, many of them have what's called a switch mode power supply, which creates extra volt or conducted emissions on the power. So I think a question is, if you're going to connect it with an Ethernet, do you still have that switch mode power supply? Because we have people who are now going without landline phones because they can't tolerate the switch mode power supply in the fiber optic system. Oh, so we have people living with no heat, living in tents in their cars. As a physical therapist, I'm shocked because throughout my whole career, I could advocate for people who had disabilities and I could get them help. And this is the very first time I have not been able to get help, and it's across the board. So now we're working with different entities, the Agency on Aging, PA Disability Rights, the Centers for Independent Living. And it's really hard. This is new to people. They don't know. And when you mentioned, Dr. McKnight not understanding what happened to her at first, the same thing with another doctor in Pennsylvania, a microwave scientist, lost her hearing because of a Wi-Fi router in her office. And here's just a microwave scientist, but no one's talking about these biological effects. Yeah. So now she is.
Right. I know people just don't know to connect the dots. And so that's why we do as much education around this as we can. To your point about the dirty electricity that's often put on the wiring and the pipes of the house, definitely a big problem. When people get sensitized to man-made radiation, some people will be more sensitive to one frequency versus another. Some people, because this can be a cumulative effect in our bodies, will be fine one day, and then you hit that tipping point and all of a sudden you are not fine. So electrosensitivities come on through a long-term exposure to low-level emissions, or like with these smart meters, it comes on very suddenly with a big exposure. But Dr. Timothy Sheckley, who has been working on this issue for many years, I think he's trying to develop a project. I think the acronym is EMMA, and I can't remember exactly what that stands for, but he's trying to develop something that will ameliorate that switch mode power supply thing, which does the spikes of
that
stuff.
Would be so helpful.
Yeah.
I think interesting. I think, as we're talking to the engineers, and some of the engineers now have developed electromagnetic sensitivity. And I think that's another really important thing, that when people develop this, they need to realize if you want to get ADA accommodations, you need to ask for them. You need to focus on disability, not health problems, but how does this affect your life? What is holding you back? Like, can you not get out of bed and walk? Do you have disabling chest pain that you can't participate in your activities of daily living because of that? You need to really use those terms. And then, the physicians who are writing these letters, like for people that are trying to get, putting in an ADA request for their, lawful right to have an accommodation, it's important to ask in the right way. So the medical doctors use the term electromagnetic hypersensitivity because that's the term in the medical literature. Mm-hmm. So it's all need to work together. And also remember at all times that we're people first. I'm a person with electromagnetic sensitivity.
Right. Yeah, we don't want to label people. We want to remove the environmental exposures so that you can live a fulfilling life, right? So, and in worst case scenarios, when doctors run their tests and come up empty, they, in some cases, will say, well, gee, it must be all in your head. Go see a psychiatrist. And that's kind of where we were with Lyme disease a decade or more ago, before we understood that it is a biological neurotoxin. And so I want to remind folks that when Donna and I fell down the rabbit hole on this issue, going on like a decade ago, I think, there wasn't really anywhere that our healthcare practitioners could go to get professionally trained on this. And since then, we've had 2 medical conferences, and the 2021 Electromagnetic Fields Medical Conference just wrapped up in July of 2023, but Elizabeth Kelly, who's the executive director of that conference, has now taken the entire content, all of the lectures by world-leading doctors and scientists, all of the discussion panels, all of the question and answer sessions, and other videos that were affiliated with the conference, and she has put them online at emfmedicalconference2021.com, but you can now access all that content for free. She has made the commitment to make this information available because these conferences take years to put together, and they're very expensive to put together, and there's just not that kind of funding in this area right now. So we don't know of another EMF medical conference that's coming down the pike. But bless Libby, because all that training is now available, and the public can go watch these lectures too. So you could go out to the EMF medical conference, take a look at all the, gosh, it's more than 60 videos, I think, ranging from like maybe 18 minutes to a half an hour to maybe an hour. And you could just start slotting them in on your calendar and just set aside a little bit of time each week to learn about this. And my goodness, from world-leading experts, we all have access to that. So please learn and share. And then last year, the first medical school textbook has now been released by Dr. Panagopoulos out of Greece, and he's an expert in electromagnetic radiation, and colleagues from around the world contributed chapters to that medical school textbook. The environmental nurses also have a chapter in their current textbook as well that addresses electromagnetic radiation. So lots of great things are happening. We are so grateful that in New Hampshire they passed a law to investigate the health and environmental impact, and they did come up with this incredible commission report that documents the conflicts of interest with the industry and our federal agencies. So they're not going to change anytime soon until the public becomes informed, says, over my dead body, am I going to let this happen to my family and my community? And then communities start building together. I do 2 free public education webinars every month. Donna is going to be co-hosting with me in the month of February, and we'll be announcing those dates soon. So please join us at Massachusetts for Safe Technology or Pennsylvanians for Safe Technology, and you'll be able to find the registration information. With a little bit of education, once we know better, we can do better. So Donna, I want to thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy day and joining us, and we wish you good health and good luck in the new year.
Thank you, Cece. I'd like to add just one thing quickly about the children in the schools. I think carrying iPads, that was the one thing that I saw that I think really needs to be called out. Children should not be having a live iPad, connected to the internet, hugging to their chest. But thank you so much for having me. This has been wonderful.
Right, and I want to do more with schools this year too, so we'll collaborate and see what we can come up with. All right, everybody, have yourselves a tech-safe day and share this information with everyone you love. Bye-bye.